Hello, and welcome to Women Finding Clarity. I'm your host, Pascal Cook Fernandez. Believe it or not, recognizing your own imperfection is a powerful step in personal growth for everyone, but particularly for women over 40 who might be navigating life transitions. When you learn to not only recognize, but also embrace your own imperfection, you're actually prone to greater self acceptance, fostering resilience and deeper self awareness. A study in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that women who practice self compassion and recognize their imperfections cope with stress more effectively. These women are 30% less likely to experience things like burnout and are better equipped to handle life transitions. But it's not like you can just wave a magic wand and suddenly your perfectionism is replaced with acceptance and personal growth. It's a process of undoing and then becoming. Firstly, it's important to understand that perfectionism is an illusion. It doesn't exist. Trying to meet impossible standards can lead to stress, anxiety, a sense of inadequacy. Instead, work on refocusing on progress. Celebrate your small wins. Recognize that each step forward, no matter how tiny, is a step closer to your goal. Remember that imperfection, mistakes, or so called failure holds valuable lessons. So view them as opportunities for growth. It's time to cultivate an awareness of refining your approach for next time. It's a subtle mindset shift that can have really big impact on your quality of life. Did you know that women who embrace imperfection have been shown to experience higher levels of life satisfaction? This is according to research published in Psychology and Aging. They report that women over 40 who adopt self compassion are 40% more likely to report feelings of joy, purpose, and fulfillment. Women, particularly in caregiving roles, often internalize the belief that they have to be perfect to deserve their own care, love, or feelings of success. And guess what this can lead to? Self criticism when imperfection comes up. Focus instead on practicing self compassion. That's acknowledging your humanity and giving yourself grace, especially during challenging moments. Self compassion can help you release guilt and shame. And if you know me, you know that I am a big proponent of manifestation. And one of the rules in the law of attraction is that nature abhors a vacuum. So when you remove feelings of guilt and shame, you're creating room for feelings of healing and empowerment to take their place. So practice authenticity over perfection in all areas of your life. Show up, be vulnerable, and just watch how you start experiencing more feelings of joy, purpose, and fulfillment. Imperfection can be viewed as part of your soul's evolution. The metaphysical belief is that every challenge, every shortcoming serves a higher purpose, leading you toward greater joy, clarity, fulfillment. They quite literally become your PhD in life. I'm excited to introduce you to my friend Suzie Forbes so you can glean wisdom from her own PhD in life, as well as her clinical expertise in embracing imperfection in parenthood. Suzie has been an occupational therapist for 30 years. She is also a mental health care clinician, award winning speaker, parenting coach, author, and mama of two kids with big emotions. Susie draws from her own personal lived experience raising her own wildlings, as well as significant training in occupational science, neuroscience, psychology, and trauma informed practices, and the privilege of extensive experience supporting thousands of families over her career in her heart led, family centered, and science based programs. Susie is passionate about helping mamas raise happier, healthier, and more helpful humans in a manner that is intentional, values based, and sustainable over time without sacrificing their own mental and physical health. So, without further ado, please welcome my friend, Suzie Forbes.
Suzie, welcome to Women Finding Clarity.
It is such a pleasure to be on here with you, Pascal. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm shocked, first of all, that I'm not speaking in an accent by now because I don't know what is wrong with my brain. But when someone talks in an accent to me, I immediately parrot it back. So I don't know.
There's actually research around that. That's empathy, my dear friend. You've got a very
Really?
empathic being and energy. And so, yeah, you're building that. There's the mirror neurons. You're building that empathy and connection.
See, and I thought, of course, that's mirror neurons, but I guess I just haven't read enough about it to know that that is empathy. So, okay, your work here is done. Bye. No, you're not getting off the hook that easy, my friend. So, first of all, I'm so excited that you're finally here. And second of all, let's just talk a little bit about where you live.
Okay. So I live in Geelong in Victoria, which is in Australia. It's in the south of Australia, about an hour out of Melbourne. So it is 7 in the morning here at the moment. So it's just getting light because we're in the middle of winter. I know you guys have had the hottest summer on earth. So we have had the coldest winter we've had for many years. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That global experience.
Yeah, when we got on the call together, I was like, oh, she's all bundled up. I wonder if it's chilly there this morning. Well, I guess it is, right? If you're in the middle of winter.
Yes. So it was about 8 degrees Celsius here. So what's that, about 40 when I first got up? Yeah.
Yeah.
No snow, not snow cold, but cold.
Cold, cold.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, it's tomorrow there because for me,
Yes.
it's, 5 p.m. we're recording this. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's tomorrow.
that's right. I got up
Yeah.
just for you, Pascal, and your listeners.
You're the cutest thing. And I so appreciate that you got up early to be here because you are so wise and you're so kind and compassionate. You have such a big, beautiful heart and you're just such a perfect fit. So I appreciate you being here and going through the extra effort.
Such a pleasure.
Hmm. So the way I generally like to start the conversation is, you know, the listeners have heard your bio, but let's talk about how you got here. What's your PhD in life that brought you to this place today?
So I guess my PhD life does center around the work I've done, which I think you'll put in the bio, but also around raising my own children, my own little wildlings, I call them.
I love it.
And, the fact that they're now beautiful, generally happy, but they're definitely healthy and usually helpful humans. I'm pretty proud of that. So I have a really passionate, lion-hearted daughter who was born with absolute fire in her belly. She was driven and focused. And when she was little, I knew that she would one day be a success if I could channel that energy into good rather than evil. Parenting a really high spirit and energy while I was also running a private practice and, single mumming basically really took specific strategies of survival for me. And I can see her leadership and her sense of community now, but and she's becoming a real activist, ocean activist, looking after sharks and all of this sort of stuff. But, at the time it was very, very difficult. And then her older brother, my son, is this highly sensitive, creative, anxious, stands at the edges sort of young fella, the indigo child who just feels the whole world in hypercolor and has to pay the price for this. Was like a superpower. He could feel everybody's emotions and it was always overwhelming for him. And so I've spent his life walking this balance between, I sort of look at it like a sword's edge, between pushing him enough that he actually builds confidence and engages in the world, but backing off enough to make sure those stress levels stay out of that toxic zone. And, lost a lot of sleep over his well-being through childhood as well. But it's so exciting now to see him as this young man who goes out in the world. He's at university, he's studying film and television, and, has this beautiful crew of friends around him. And it's just fabulous to see that turn around. But when they were really little, we had a series of traumas, all of us, and it was really hard to then parent them out of that as a single parent, working full time, doing all those things, right? And the other part is, in talking to lots of mamas and talking to lots of parents in general, but mums particularly, is our kids have this magical way of mirroring and exposing the triggers and the fears that we have. I'm sure you would have had this experience.
Oh,
Pascal.
no, my life has been perfect.
They seem to be able to just very gently and then quite firmly push that exact button that makes us feel inadequate or like we've not done enough and those sorts of things. So when they were little, I had this really highly spirited, temperamental one, had to be her way or the highway, and she had her hands in her hips and all of this all the time. And then I had this sensitive, clingy one who I could not peel off my body. And I was constantly overwhelmed, constantly exhausted, constantly second guessing myself. And I think because I had trauma myself as a young person growing up as well, this all just triggered this not enoughness for myself as well. And I can remember a time when they were little and I locked myself in the bedroom and I kind of shut the door and then leaned on the door so they couldn't see me, but I was just bawling my eyes out, just could not work out how to get myself out of it. And the words that I used to myself were just so mean. I would never use those words to anybody else, but I was really beating myself up. And at the same time, I was an occupational therapist and I was already a mental health care practitioner running a private practice. The private practice was super successful. I had a team I supported, supervised. We served hundreds of families each week. But inside of me, I had this, I suppose it was imposter syndrome. I was a developmental specialist, but I felt so much shame. I was not sure I was enough as an OT. I was not sure I was enough in my business. But more importantly, I really didn't think I was enough as a mama, that I was doing it right. That idea that we have to do it right. And so, I was so exhausted and all I wanted was connection for them both. But it was absolutely impossible for me to create because I felt like I had to keep them safe. We weren't yet safe. And I also had to work to bring food in for our family. And, there was so much guilt and my heart was heavy with worry. Really, at the time, I really worried that my son would lock himself in his room one day and never come out, and never really amount to anything. And that my daughter would be this out of control, angry teenager and maybe leave with a bikie gang and set fire to things one day. I know it sounds ridiculous now, but I was pretty convinced that because I wasn't enough, those outcomes were kind of there. So something did shift in me that day though, and I made a decision and I stopped and you know what the difference was is I kind of finally just created a pause and stood back from the emotion, like actually pushed it away a little bit and created a little bit of space, right? Which is what we now teach people to do a lot of the time. So, and what I realized is I needed help. And I'd never asked for help. And I also, as an OT, I always start with strengths. So I sat there and I sort of said to myself, if you walked into your office as a mum in crisis, what would you say to yourself? And what I would have said was, you need to start with your strengths. What are your strengths, Suzie? And my strengths were building relationships. So I had great friends. I just didn't lean on them the way I needed to lean on them. And I needed to get support. So I actually got myself a beautiful life coach. She's still one of my best friends, 15, 20, 16 years later. And she really helped me not only connect with myself and the tools I needed, but also connect to the knowledge I needed because knowledge is a superpower for me. I really, really value knowledge. So I spent a lot of time, energy and money in training and self-development for myself, building through this, working through this not enoughness, but also teaching myself a lot around neuroscience. I went on, did my graduate diploma in psychology. I got really great mentors around me professionally as well as personally. And what I was able to do is I was actually able to then week by week in my family, but also in the families I worked with so many of them with kids with challenging behaviors, with trauma, with these really big, intense emotions that just don't sort of recover quickly. I was able to apply what I was learning, and I learned what was most powerful. I learned what was possible. And more than that, I learned what was actually sustainable in busy families. Because, researchers can have a great idea about this, 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 and this, but then you try and apply it in your busy, crazy family, and you're like, this doesn't work. This is a crazy idea. So that I could actually whittle down for families, whether they have a lot of resources or not, what sorts of things are going to be most valuable to support the family with kids with challenging behaviors and big emotions. But not only that, what's going to be most protective of the mental health of those kids and of the parents over time, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's a huge issue. And so now I walk in this great confidence that the strategies that I've developed work because I have these beautiful, empathic, globally minded young people that I'm lucky enough to have mothered walking around. And I have seen that the knowledge and the strategies and skills have brought so much harmony for families that I've supported as well. Yeah. So that's kind of my PhD. I know it was a bit long-winded.
No, it
It's a good
just made me
story.
take a breath and it made me, yeah, it made me take a full breath and just land in it because you walked us through years and years and years of a process in this very short amount of time. And what I love about that is, first of all, anybody who is listening who is where you were and is like, I'm not enough. I'm ruining my children. I can't raise them to be the people I want them to be. The shame, the imposter-ness of all of it that is motherhood. Someone can look at your journey that you just reduced down to the size of a meter stick and say, okay, wait, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. And so I loved that you walked us through the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to give huge props to you being a single mom and raising two beautiful and wonderful human beings on this earth because my husband was here and he was we were a team with our three kids, and it was still hard. And I give the biggest props to single moms or single dads, single parents, because I don't know how you do it all.
I think sometimes, that's that silly adage of, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be is certainly true. And it's certainly true in my sort of story. I really didn't ever know what I could do until I had to do it. But I still think it's hard for families in general. There's a lot of pressure in our world. Our world is so much more fast paced than when you and I were kids, And so there's so much more external pressure on families and so much more that we need to be mindful of what our kids are engaging with and the influences of those things over time as well.
Yeah, when my kids were younger, it was so easy to say, no, you can't have a phone. Like that sounded ridiculous to me. And they didn't get a phone until they started being outside of our control. And by that, I mean, when my daughter took the babysitter course when she was 12 and started babysitting, she got her first phone that year because she now wasn't either with us or with another adult that we full on trusted to take care of her needs. Now she's taking care of the needs of other children. We felt like that was the time. But the conversation now for parents now starts younger and younger and younger.
Yeah. And look, we are the first generation of parents who have raised children with phones in their hands from when they were tiny. So my daughter, I bought my first iPhone, like I had the old Nokia flip phone when my son was a baby. But when my daughter was a baby, I had like the iPhone 1, right? Or the iPhone 2. I think I got the 2. I didn't get the 1.
Ooh, fancy pants.
She could work that thing, like she was a bubba and she could work that thing. And I was not a parent who just handed it to her. She had to negotiate.
I love it.
But she could work it even when she had small amounts of time with it. So, the children today and our teenagers today have had these devices in their hand and that immediate access to information, and the flow of information coming in is so rapid. There was a study done that showed that what a child's actually exposed to in a week is what in the 1970s and 80s we would have been exposed to over 3 months.
Wow.
So you think about like the mental health implications of that in terms of overwhelming the brain and the brain's ability to actually integrate information, make sense of it, make sense of the world, have it sit into their sense of identity, sense of who they are, sense of how they fit in the world, and that developing sense of identity and the impact of that. And that's part of that. We need to slow things down. We need to bring rhythms and routines into play that slow things down. And the whole movement to, outside like bush kinder and nature kinder and getting our kids outside, the value in that is it's removing that constant flow of information and allowing them to actually integrate into the real world and what the real world feels like and how it sits in their sense of identity emotionally and psychologically as well. So
I had never heard that fact, the comparison, and it makes so much sense then why there is as big of a mental health crisis as there is, and why so many kids now have anxiety because their nervous systems literally cannot keep up with the pace. So not only is it great for them to get out and, be in nature and unplug from all of that, but also when they're in nature, it's pulling out nature literally we'll say disinfects them because it pulls out all of the positive ions and kind of takes their stress away. And so that's why, like, if you're stressed, take your socks and shoes off and go stand outside. Maybe not when it's as cold as it is where you are right now, but
it's still
absolutely, like, that's real science. It actually works. It's not just woo woo, right?
no, it's not where we're
No.
and it's so important for parents as well. Like I know for
Yes.
me, moments of sanity were often at the park or at the beach where if it was all getting really rowdy, I always say to families, if it's not working, change the environment. So if you're out and it's not working, bring them home. If you're home and it's not working, it's too rowdy, go out. Like just pack them up and go to the beach, go to the, park, go to the lake, the river, whatever. And be outside, whether it's great weather or not, it's still great for kids as long as you've got them in the right clothing. And it gives you time as a parent also to de-stress as well. And when we de-stress, like I did in my story as well, but we know this through research, when we can create space for ourselves as well, that's actually when our problem-solving brain can click in terms of neuroscience. So if we're worried about things and we need to solve a problem, if we stay in that stress state, it makes it really hard for us to do that. But if we can get outside and watch our kids playing, having fun on a park or the beach or in another environment where it's much easier for everybody, and often a natural environment decreases mum's stress or dad's stress as well, right? And they can get a bit of exercise in as well, which pumps a few endorphins in as well. You suddenly find that your problem-solving brain, your frontal lobe can kick in and you've got some better problem solving for yourself as well. But also your kids are more ready for that sort of problem solving, collaborative problem solving that I also teach to families. So, which makes a huge difference because that allows them to develop their regulation skills, And there are other executive functioning skills, such as being able to problem solve, such as being able to initiate tasks and be motivated to do things because they know they're important, not just because they're fun, even if they're boring or tricky. Being able to persist with those things. They're all those executive functions that only kick in when we feel regulated, when we're not feeling too stressed or too tired or too overwhelmed or too exhausted. Yeah.
Or two, right? In parenthood, there's so many twos.
Yeah. And there's so much external advice. It's often hard to listen to your own voice with the noise. I don't know if
Yeah.
you had that experience, Pascal, but it was very strong for me. There was so much noise. That's one of the reasons I was driven to go and do all this research, was because I wanted to cut through what was actually really evidence-based and what was just talk, or opinion, like the idea of, I had people saying to me, well, I smacked my children, I was smacked as a child and I was fine. And I was sort of like, yeah, that doesn't fit with me. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then going back and looking at research, and actually, we know that if you smack your children often, by the time your children are actually getting into states where they're having conflict or they're having trouble, one, that's how they know to solve a problem. But two, which you don't want, but
Right.
two, when strife happens, do you think they're going to turn towards you or do you think they're going to turn away? So when you ask that person who was smacked, when you got into strife as a teenager, because we all got into strife as teenagers, did you turn towards your father who used to smack you? And I can guarantee they'll say, nah, never. Even as an adult, I'll never speak to my father if stuff went on. So if we want relationships in the long term, and this is why we have to start at the beginning and what we want for our kids in the long term, if we want relationships in the long term with our kids to be these positive, connected, not necessarily always happy, because we want them to come to us when things are not happy. We want
Right.
them to turn
And it's
towards us.
not realistic.
No,
So
but
you're
it's
setting them up to fail, to think that everything is always going to be happy and everything is always going to feel good.
yeah. And I think, but if we want these authentic relationships, we have to come up with parenting strategies that are actually going to teach them how to do that, that have some evidence to them that we know work. And, that's what I do in my programs too. So it's really exciting work to watch families change for the positive, and watch mums particularly, because that's who seems to come to me, is Women Looking for Clarity, as the name of your podcast. But actually building, when they build that clarity and that knowledge of, this is the toolkit I need and I want and that works for my family, their confidence just skyrockets, because now, even when all that external noise is coming in, they go, okay, that's great. And if that works for you, fantastic. But I know this is what works for me. And they can sit and stand in that power. And even as things change, they have got tools of how to actually change that and have clarity on how to do that themselves. And that's their game changers. Because when our kids can see us being clear and confident, guess what happens? Our kids mirror it, right?
I was
They
just going
mirror
to say
us.
mirror neurons. Yeah,
Yeah, they copy what we do. Kids do as we do, not as we say most of the time.
absolutely.
So,
Whether you want them to or not, right?
right,
And
right.
I mean, the reality is that, I just want to go back for a second. Something that you said was, well, I was hit as a child and I turned out fine. So, but did you?
That's what I'm
Right?
saying. Yeah,
Yeah. Did
that's what
you?
I'm
And let's talk about what you did and did not like from the way you were raised. And how do you want that to look for your children? What do you want to change, right? None of us are perfect. I am
No.
certain that by the time my kids, they're all young adults now, and by the time they find their person, get married, have children, whatever, I'm sure they're going to look at the way they were raised and be like, okay, I like that. Check. I like that. No way I'm doing that. You know what I mean? So it's fine. And I don't take it as a slight, because not only are we different people, but the world is ever changing. And so what works at one time with one generation isn't necessarily going to work with the next generation.
And look at us blind parenting these kids who have suddenly had devices in their hands. That's never happened before. So we were building that plane as we were flying it, right? This influx of information. And so I think the world does change around us very quickly. And you've raised a really good point, which is that, and the research shows us we don't have to be perfect. And actually, when we try to be perfect, we create so much more stress that flows onto our kids as well. So we what we want to do is be intentional, is the word I use. We want to be mindful of what we know is important and what works, and we want to be able to put that into place. And can I give you a little story? Can I give you a little example of that?
Yes, please.
So one of the things that I learned in my coaching when my kids were little and that I teach now is the absolute value of values in your family to support the intention that you have around the parenting choices that you make. And also how that allows you to rest, because every time you think, oh, I don't know quite what to do, you can sit back in your value and go, what's the action that's going to allow me to teach this value to my child and to model this value for my child as well? So I'll give you an example. My daughter used to have this, and she still does it actually, but not to the same intensity. She used to have this habit where at night, so we would do the whole bedroom routine, sleep routine and all that sort of stuff. So at night when she was going to bed, I'd give her a little rub on her back and a cuddle and all that sort of stuff. She would start this list of grievances for the day. Johnny knocked over my blocks. Beth was mean to Jane. This happened, that happened, and they were grievances. It was literally a list of grievances. And sometimes this was just a couple of things. And sometimes it went on and on and on. And for any parent, the get to bed, please go to sleep is a stressful event. My life at that time was, I'm a single parent. I'm working all day while my kids are at childcare and at school or kindy. And then as soon as I pick them up, kindy is preschool in Australia. Sorry, we call preschool kindergarten. So, he's at kindy, she's at daycare. I'm picking them up, coming home, doing all the mum stuff, starting a little bit of, all their activities, whatever they're doing dinner, bath, bed, all of that sort of stuff. And then I have to sit down and do my paperwork for my business. So literally I was then working from 9 till 12, and then I'm up at 5 the next morning again. So I just want her to go to sleep. Just go to sleep. So, but then, and this became a really big problem because she would she'd go on and on. And as soon as I'd try and shut it down, she'd get really dysregulated. The angry little beast would come out. And then it would take even longer, Pascal. So there was two things here, keeping the end in mind, right? One, my short-term goal was I just wanted her to go to sleep. So there was no point fighting with her or trying to shut it down because I knew that would prolong it. But two, I had this value of connection at the very top of my list of values. And I knew if I wanted to raise a young adult who was connected, that I needed to let her feel seen and heard, right? So what I did very intentionally is I pulled her bedtime back by half an hour, slowly, just gently, so she didn't notice because she's up. So I knew I had extra time. And then the other thing I did in my mind was I realized she didn't want me to fix these things. She just wanted to unload them from her heart to me so I could hold these heavy things for her. And so I would just listen. It wasn't adding to my list. That's where my stress was coming from. My stress was coming from because I felt like it was adding to my list of things I needed to take care of. And actually I didn't. She just needed to tell me about them. Yeah. She didn't want it fixed. So it allowed me to then sit back and go, I hear you. I see you. Oh, that was crap. Gee, that was mean. What did you do about that? And it built her problem solving, but it also built her voice. It built her sense of I can do this on her own without me trying to come in and fix, without me adding my stress to her stress. She was just literally able to take the stress off her heart and hand it to me so she could go to sleep really easily. And what I found as soon as I did that, the periods of time, so some nights the grievances list was still long, but the period of time we spent doing them got shorter and shorter. and she was better able to go to sleep. And, I think her heart was a bit lighter, which made me feel happy as her mum. And yeah, and the long-term effect of that is that at 16 and 17 is that when crap goes down at 9 o'clock, it will still be at 9 o'clock at night. I don't know why. It's got to be the quiet time when everybody else is left. There's kind of this mama, and I know something's coming, but she turns towards me and she'll tell me if something's caused stress or there's something going on that's not quite right at school or with the friendship group or those sorts of things. And you want that.
That's everything.
Right.
That's
like as a parent of a
everything.
teenager. Right. You want that
Yeah.
because that's how you keep them healthy and safe.
Yeah.
Is by them being willing to have those, okay, I'm going to fall back on you, mum, and have that conversation with you at that point. So,
That is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that story, because I feel like whether we're talking about parenting or we're talking about running your business or we're talking about meeting people outside of your home or, out in the world, whatever the case is, it always comes back to your values.
it does.
One of the things that I like to tell my clients is your values are your value, right? Because when you are standing in your values, and that's clear, evident, people know what to expect from you. You know what to expect from yourself. You're better able to handle situations that may arise unexpectedly, right? And I mean, look at you with the problem solving, all by going back to that value of connection. That changed everything. And that is what supported your relationship to grow and be what it still is today. So kudos to you, Mama.
Yeah. And you can apply it across everything. Yeah. So, like what
Yeah.
you're saying, you can apply it in so many ways, and it gives you a place to rest. It means you're not just spinning wheels everywhere. You're going, okay, because we can't be everything to everyone all of the time. Right. So, if we really, it's this clarity that you talk about, so if you can really hone it down, and with my families, I try to get them to bring it down to 3 values, not lots, because again, in the overwhelm of a busy life, and it's the same in business, but in the overwhelm of a busy life, it's hard to connect to more than that a lot of the time for people. And so when I first started, I started with connection, kindness, and compassion. And it was all too soft because my little boy who wanted to just cling and cuddle to me, I was like, no, okay, we're adding, somebody gave me the gifts of imperfection. And I was like, right. So Brene Brown. So I was like, right, we add bravery to this. So compassion went out and we added bravery. So everything I would say to my kids was around be connected, be kind, be brave. Do something that scares you a little bit. Be kind to yourself and to others, and stay connected, because when things get hard, being connected is what makes it easier, And so I use that across so many different things. Devices. So here's another, parents are always like, what do we do? So as I said, we're the first generation who had to, us with our young adult kids now, we are the first generation who had to parent kids with devices in their hands. And, now there are people who were actually raised with devices in their hands, raising kids. So it's a brand new sort of frontier. But with the devices, again, I went back to that connection. And so my kids knew that if they were watching YouTube or they were watching, playing a game or whatever, that if I said, hey, I need to talk to you, they would have one ear out. So they often would wear their headphones with one ear out because they knew if I couldn't get their attention, if they were so hyper-focused on the screen that I couldn't have a conversation with them, that the screen would be taken away. And I only had to do it a couple of times, right? It's that balance. Not meanly, but just, hey, I need to talk to you. Hey, I need to talk to you. Well, it's gone now, hasn't it? But most of the time, what actually would happen is they would say, can I finish the game? And I'd say, yes, finish the game. And then we're going to turn it off and you're going to come and talk to me because we need to have a chat. And it came back to that value of connection. We're a connected family is what I'd say. We're a connected family. I need to talk to you. I want to finish the game, Mum. And the reason I would let them finish the game or finish the end of that YouTube and then come and talk to me was because if I'm in the middle of an email or I'm writing something myself and they come up to me, I expect them to wait. So, of course, I need to have that back for them as well. And in that model of we're connected and we care for each other, that kindness that we care for each other as well, it allowed us to do that. So, rather than I did have restrictions on my children's iPad time until they got to high school age. But rather than have really strict rules that you've got to enforce as a policeman, using the values as a basis of that. So again, yes, you've got restricted YouTube time, but we're a connected family. And that's why, because we do all these other things. Like my kids did lots of sport and music, and we did lots of stuff together as a family, bike rides, park, beach. So you can only have this much time. But on top of that, because I did it this way, so they actually I remember when they were in about grade, I think they must have been she was probably second grade and he was fifth grade, and then third grade, sixth grade, right? They were allowed 30 minutes of YouTube each a week. So they would pool. This is the connected family, right? So I would say to them, well, why don't you be smart about it? And so they worked out, they would pool their time. They would often choose one video, like a 20-minute Stampy video or something that they'd watch for, 20 minutes. And then they still had 20 minutes each that they could use independent of that. And so they would stretch their time. And so what I'm doing again is I'm teaching them to build problem solving, collaborative work, let's work together as a team to get more, let's, connect with one another. And it was so cool because then you could see them doing that with their friends as well. So there's so many ways when they're little to embed that value and then embed opportunities to teach these really specific executive functioning skills, which, by the way, are huge predictors of mental well-being in the long term and success in the long term, that they'll have social circles that are positive, that they'll be able to cope with the storms when they come, because storms are going to come. We can't stop that.
100%.
That we've given them the tools to actually manage those, to know when to shelter in place, or to know how to actually access support that they need, or how to actually problem solve their way out of a pickle if they need to do that. And also just general success, like academic and business work success down the track as well. So it's a strong correlation between that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Suzie, what's so amazing about you is that, when in the beginning, you went in the bedroom and shut the door and leaned on the door and you cried and said all these terrible things about yourself. And you already had a background in mental health and wellness. And so you knew to say, okay, if a client came in and, da, 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 you knew that, and still you found yourself in this place. Everyone doesn't have that base of knowledge yet. The thing that is so amazing about you is you understand that, and you go out and you have conversations with parents where I don't think that used to happen, right? So you make yourself accessible and you put this information out there. So even if you don't have a mental health background, there's people like Suzie who are giving you information and helping you along the way. And, you're so accessible compared to what we had as young parents back then. And that's amazing. And that is a gift to parents.
Thank you. And what's cool is I've kind of distilled down that 20 years of experience, right, into of parenting my own wildlings, plus, the thousands of families I've been lucky enough, privileged enough to support.
Yeah.
But I've whittled that down into something that's really practical and, ready to go for parents to be able to access, as you're saying, really easily, those supports that they need, and to grab from it the tools that work for them, because there's lots of tools in there and not all of them are going to work for everybody, right? So I talk about that parent toolkit, but at my system I call stormproofing your kids, because I really do sit with that analogy of, we can't stop the waves from coming, but we can learn to surf, right? That John Kabat-Zinn sort of quote. But the idea is that the storms and the life's pressures, and as I've said, I feel the pressure cooking is heating up, like there's more and more stress. And so I'm really driven to reduce that stress on parents because I know that for the well-being of kids, that's going to be improved. And if that means these whittled down tools that they can access easily, quickly, that align with their values and their goals for their kids and their families, that it's so powerful because it gives them spaces to rest. And that's actually what we need in today's high pressure world. We all need spaces for what I call productive rest.
Yeah. Can you
All
talk
of
a
us.
little bit more about that, about productive rest? Because let me just tell you, I'm a napper, and I know that it is proven scientifically, thank you very much, that it is good to take a nap, whatever. But productive rest versus sitting and scrolling through TikTok.
Well, it's that idea. Yes. Okay. So that's one very good example. It's actually, again, it comes back to being intentional. And so much of what I teach is about being intentional. So it's about not waiting until you're at the point of collapse and then your body making you sick so that you have to rest. Like, it's actually like, let's go back a few steps and actually give ourselves some proper rest. It's about a cup of tea in the sunshine, even if it's freezing cold, popping a blankie around you and going out with your cuppa in the morning and getting that fresh air and being in the garden. And, as you said, changing those ions, but also just changing that energy and being able to have time out from all the demands is probably the key of productive rest. So I do yoga twice a week. I go to a yoga class twice a week because my life is so busy that unless it's structured in, it's really hard for me to find that space to do it. But it's also about those little moments that you find during the day where you can just stop and look outside and look at the sky, like pretty sky, just for a few moments and bring it back in so that your brain actually has time to integrate information and your body, probably moving your body as well is a really great, well, it's proven to be a really great way for us to also integrate that in. So if you can go for a walk at lunchtime or make it a priority to do that, or park your car a bit further if you go to work or you're going to a place of business, park your car a little. I went to a meeting yesterday and I parked my car a little bit further and I walked a kilometre in and a kilometre back just so that I could sneak that in during my work day and just get a bit of sunshine. So they're neuro hacks, right? And that productive rest is a series of neuro hacks, and starting your day that way can be key. So even building in a morning routine and I know it's hard for parents, especially if you've got young kids and you're running businesses as well, it can be hard, but just getting up 10 minutes earlier or 15 minutes earlier and popping outside for that cuppa, as I said, or doing some stretches in your bedroom before you go out and start waking kids up and managing whatever else that you need to manage, versus waking up and just immediately picking up the phone and going into scroll land. I used to keep, when my kids were little, I actually had a dock out in the lounge room, actually on my desk in the study, which was open to the lounge room where all the devices went at night, including my own. So I wasn't tempted to do that, to wake up and just start scrolling. So I have to get up, do a bit of a stretch, go and get my cuppa. And that was my neuro hack to start my day, even if it was at 5 a.m. and it was dark, which I think still thinks a bit rude.
I know. It's just not right. There's just something that's that's about winter is you go to bed, like you come home from work and it's dark and you get up and it's dark. Yeah.
And I think, again, if we look at olden days, like we used to have rhythms. Like if you worked on a farm, we used to have rhythms that went with the seasons. So in winter, we did spend more time. We'd go and do the work, but we got up with the sun and we did the work, and then we went to bed with the sun and we snuggled in with fires and food and family, right? And then in summer, we worked longer hours because the sun's up, and our bodies respond to that much better, and our psychology responds to that much better. Yeah. So when we thrive and push ourselves through winter, and I know you're having a hot summer, but you will have a winter.
I know, don't say it.
And you're right. We're going to work in the dark and we're coming home in the dark, and there's no times that's why I'm like, sneak out at lunchtime, have a little walk and get the sun on your face if it's out. And even if it's not, still, getting a little bit of time outside can change that environment, change the internal environment as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you if you had any tips, but you just gave a million tips. So you're just so ahead of the game here. But, as we're closing up, Suzie, is there anything that, because I know people are going to want to talk to you more. So is there anything that you'd like to offer listeners?
Yeah, so I've got a little ebook that's called Stop the Fighting Now. And what it actually teaches you in that 10 pages is what I call a collaborative problem solving model with your kids. It's great from kids sort of from 3 or 4 up to about 10 or 12, depending on what they will tolerate. But I'll tell you, I used this tool with my kids, with my wildlings, from when they were 3 and 5, 3 and 6. And by the time they were sort of 7 and 10, I would literally just bring this tool out and they would start the collaborative problem solving and they would quickly come up with a solution. So I remember actually vividly when my daughter was 8 and she was old enough to then sit in the front seat of the car. I'm not sure if that's the age in the United States, but here in Australia, until they're 8, they're not allowed in the front seat of the car. And there was immediately this fight about, well, who gets to sit in the front? Because he'd always sat in the front seat, right? Now it's like, no, I'm sitting in the front seat every time now. So I got out the we have a problem tool to go through with our kids. So it's basically a collaborative problem solving tool where we brainstorm a whole bunch of good and bad. It's just a brainstorm. Like the kids come up with crazy things. Like it's really fun and interesting to hear what they come up with. And then we sort of guide towards an idea that we all as a collective can agree to, and then consequences if people don't follow the agreement, right? So it's like it ends up as a contract, but it's actually a process of collaborative problem solving, which teaches all those powerful executive functioning tools that I was telling you about. But anyway, in under a minute, I kid you not, without me saying a word, I just got the blue folder down. So I had this blue folder that had the tool in it that I used.
Yeah.
I got the blue folder down and they both went. And I tell you, to this day, what they agreed on still stands. He sits in the front on the way there. She sits in the front on the way back. It's different now because they're both sort of driving.
Yeah.
So often mum sits in the front and the other one drives, or he drives or whatever. But yeah, until that point that they came up with that solution themselves. So
what I love about that is that then they feel heard, right? Because it's so easy as a parent to want to just fix it and move on. Okay, you know what? This is how it's going to be. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. I don't want to hear another word about it. But with this tool that parents can learn, both children or all the people involved
family
get to have their voices heard. And then you come to an agreement and you've agreed to it. So what is there to fight about? Yeah.
And sometimes it takes time. You have to actually teach them how to do these skills because these skills are not necessarily really easy for some people. And sometimes they're not even easy for parents. Sometimes, because the first part of it, the parent needs to feel regulated and calm and that they can listen really clearly to their children. But the other part about it is not only do your kids feel heard, you're actually teaching them how to do this themselves. And again, I would watch my kids in their early teens and even, today with their friends, if they're trying to decide, Kylie's mates are trying to decide which pub they're going to go to or whatever, and there's a negotiation going on, he will use the exact strategies that I taught him through this tool as a little kid to manage his group of mates and to help them actually come to a collaborative solution that's good for most, and that most can palate, that it's palatable.
Well,
so
and that's what it is, right? It's,
Right.
In a group like that, it is what's good for the majority. So,
yeah. And in the
that's
family,
amazing.
still understanding that sometimes you're not going to get your way and that's going to be okay and that we can do tricky things together and we're going to support you. And on another one of these, you will get a bigger say. Sometimes that's going to happen. And again, being able to motivate a child through something they don't want to do or they're not keen on, not forcing it, but having them understand the basis of it is we are a connected family. We're doing this together because this works for most of us. but next time maybe something that you want, it will work for most of us as well, you know, and there's going to be times where we have to take care of each other. And this is a time where you have to take care of your brother, or this is a time where you have to take care of your sister. And we take it in turns, and that's okay. That's what families do. So, you know, because I think one of the issues is kids often grow up thinking, you know, so parents, if you're having to actually go, right, it's going to be this way and we're going to do it that way and we're going to do, and the kids don't want that, you're going to spend all this time policing, which is stressful for you.
Yeah.
Disconnects you from your kids, doesn't build connection with your kids, and they're not going to do it anyway.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's just going to create, that's what makes us crazy as parents.
Until you finally give up or give in.
Right. And then what have you taught them? Nothing. And what have you just end up feeling rubbish at the end of it, right? Or you end up yelling and feeling even worse. So I have a lot of families who, you know, talk to me about this, that I don't want to yell, but they just don't listen. And so therefore I end up yelling. So that's why this tool's so powerful if you can master it. It takes a while, but once you teach your kids the strategies, as I said, they can learn to do it themselves really well. And kids are taught these sorts of tools at schools too. So often they have, if they're already in primary school, in elementary school, they often have a little bit of a feel for this sort of an idea, this collaborative problem solving idea.
I love it. I love it. You're amazing. The link for that tool is in show notes. So everybody run and click on that link so you can get this free tool and start the in your family.
Stop the fighting now in your family. That's why I call it Stop the Fighting.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Suzie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. You are you're just a force. You're a beautiful, gentle force.
So sweet. Thank you so much for having me, Pascal. It's an absolute honor.
So much of what Suzie focuses on with parents and families can be embraced by each of us individually in our lives. I adore her authenticity and her straightforward approach to bringing more peace and ease into daily life. She quite literally embraces her own imperfections and uses them as stepping stones to make the world a better place, one family at a time. If you're ready to find your inner power, gain clarity on your path, and feel confident about moving forward with purpose and intention, visit www.womenfindingclarity.com/appointments, or just click on the link in show notes. Whether you're navigating a life transition, seeking greater fulfillment, or simply ready to put yourself first, booking a session will leave you with renewed energy and clear direction. It's time to discover your personal power and step into the life you deserve. It's time to find more clarity. Remember, the universe is abundant and success is your birthright. Let's align, elevate, and thrive together, one conversation at a time. Good night. Thank you for being in our Women Finding Clarity community. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite listening platform, and share it with someone you know so they can find clarity from the conversation as well. Remember, the universe is abundant and success is your birthright. Let's align, elevate, and thrive together, one conversation at a time. See you next week.